and welcome to this Fantasy Fellowship Buddy Read wrap-up session. My name is Sarah, and joining me from the Fantasy Fellowship community today is Chris, Damien, Amy, and Alice. Today we're going to be talking through the Buddy Reads from the month of November. So I have a stack of them here. I am missing one though. But we've got The Way of Kings, Tomorrow, The Ember Blade, Empire of Vampire, and I'm missing Throne of Glass. So we've got a whole mix of them today. And we're going to start with the Ember Blade. So we're going to come to you, Chris.
Hi.
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 Well, I don't know where to start with the Ember Blade, really. It's kind of... I think from the group chat, it was kind of an underrated, but really, I don't know what the best way to put it is. It was kind of a hype book, but no one had really got round to reading it.
Yeah.
It was the same for myself, but it kind of had those sort of Tolkien vibes. Everyone on the buddy read was kind of getting around to reading it at some stage and was on the radar for a long time, but it was kind of one of those ones you kind of put to the side, but it was always on the list and high up on mine. And it did have those Tolkien vibes. It's very much, I think it was like 900 pages, 700 pages, something like that. I've got it sat next to me, so I probably should look. But it's one of those sort of quest books, finding the realities of two young guys, how they sort of maneuver through the reality of what they're going through, and different realms, going in prison. You know, it's a story of quest, I think, and an epic one as well.
It's very like classic feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's sort of, you know, the Tolkien thing kept popping up, and it's kind of a sort of, I don't want to put it on the same level, but it's kind of sort of, and I don't want to badmouth it by saying it's not, you know, it's not Tolkien, or it's an underrated Tolkien, but it's on that vibe, and it's a quest book that I think most people in the sort of sci-fi fantasy genre should read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about it myself. And I actually started it a few weeks ago. Sarah wanted me to for the video that we're doing now. But prior to that, I had heard a lot about it. Sarah was actually the first person who sort of like got it on my radar. I remember I was reading Ryan Cahill's of Blood and Fire, the Bound of the Broken series, and a lot of people were saying it's quite similar to the Ember Blade, which is very questy, very Wheel of Time sort of vibe. You know, young lads going on an adventure, sprawling the globe. You know, good versus evil, that sort of thing. And Sarah and Dean from the Discord actually suggested it to me multiple times, and that to me is what is classic fantasy. That is the epitome of fantasy. You know, I know there's a lot of people that don't like a quest, but for me, that is epic fantasy. You know what it says on the tin. That's what I love. You know, nice quest. You go and explore these different places. They meet different weird folk on the way, and yeah, just a nice adventure. So obviously, you know, that's something I would love to read at some point. Obviously, I read the first few chapters, but yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I think it takes those first few chapters to get into. Like the Tolkien thing keeps popping up. I think I've read every review, and everyone on the buddy read kind of had that sort of same feeling, where it has the same vibe. Like you have those people coming from nowhere, and then they're hoisted into like a massive scenario where everything is just culminating together. And they have that thing, the same sort of thing with Tolkien, where they have the epic adventure side of things. Like they go into a place where no one's been. It's steeped in mystery and magic, and there's demons and, you know, evil properties that are around all the time, and it's all that life and death, like on the edge all the time.
Yeah,
the whole thing is quest with some really backed up by some really, really great characters.
Yeah, and they're kind of joined along the way, aren't they, by different and they kind of come from like the different tropes, but I think there's something like very comforting reading a book like that, because it feels really familiar. especially if you grew up with, like, obviously
Very
you keep saying it, but yeah.
We've spoken about before, Sarah. You know, like one of our favourite things about quest books as well is it's not the action, it's they reach a different town or village and they spend the night in an inn, meeting the locals, and everything's sort of like simmered down for a bit. And you know, they're drinking at an inn. They, you know, like in Wheel Time, Isle of the Whales, where they spend a few of the chapters playing at different inns and meeting the locals. That, and with Lord of the Rings as well, the Prancing Pony and Bree. Yeah, that's what and obviously Sarah as well, that's what we love from fantasy. You know, when it quiets down, it doesn't always need to be the go epic sort of battles, but when it's got the quest feel to it and they meet these different people and it quiets down for a bit, you know, that's what I love the most.
It has quite the ending though, doesn't it, Chris?
Yeah. It's the I said it on the buddy read. It's the sort of beautiful heartache of the book. I think that's the sort of crux of the book. It goes on such a journey that you have to kind of finish it with that, I don't know, that magnificent end that everyone's kind of, they know it's coming, but they don't want to believe it's coming. And it sets up for the next book really well.
Which is out quite soon, isn't it, the Shadow Casket?
Yeah, I think some sort of copies or arcs are out at the moment.
I think the thing that I remember most about that book, because I read it like, I think it was like this time last year, is the friendship between the two main characters. And I always love like friendships in books, in fantasy books. That's like my favourite dynamic. I'd rather read that than romance, although we'll get to the romance fantasy in a minute. But yeah, how did it go down with the Discord, Chris?
It was kind of all this. It's strange because I looked through it tonight and it was all. I'm kind of getting round to this book. Then everyone that read it was kind of blown away. It was a really slow burner for most, I think. And then it got into the last. I think for most people, the last 100 pages or 200 pages, where the action really started. And
my edition is like 825 pages. I remember it took me like 2 months to read because I was in a massive slump.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I get to kind of audio whilst I'm reading, so I can get through them pretty quick. But yeah, the last few chapters, say, is when I think the good stuff happens. It's the epitome of the story, the fantasy story, and it leaves on an ending that makes you want more.
Will you be reading the next one?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Buddy read? Bloody love a buddy read.
Like, it's too big for buddy reads. It's literally stacking up next to me.
Don't reject me on camera, Chris. God.
That's the problem, Sarah. You suggest buddy reads and then you don't turn up for them.
That's so true. I always like organise buddy reads. I never do them. Do you not ever agree to a buddy read with me?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you put the first messages in most of the buddy reads. Yeah.
Why do I always get called out on these things every single time?
Empire of Vampire. She's not even read it.
I think a lot of us are like that though, because I'm the same. I think I actually signed up to do all of the buddy reads this month. And I only did.
You get so excited, don't you? And like every book sounds amazing.
The problem is you want to click them. It's finding the time to do it.
Yeah. Funny enough, I can't talk because I was actually the second for Ember Blade, and obviously
there we go then.
And the only book that I did read this month, I only read one book this month, is the one book that I didn't sign up for.
Well, there you go then, Damien. Exactly. So that will teach you for calling me out.
It will. Shame on me.
Right, that was excellent. Anyone adding the Ember Blade to their TBR pile?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I've already got it on Kindle, but I just haven't got it.
Yeah, I think it's staple. Yeah, it's a great book. And I don't think I've done it justice. It's a great book.
Oh, you have, I think.
You have, Chris. Yeah,
you sold it.
Yeah.
Well done. Right, let's move on to Amy, and we're talking about Throne of Glass. Has anyone else read? Alice, have you read Throne of Glass? No.
No, it's the one Maas series I haven't started.
Is this your first time reading it, Amy?
Yeah, so I've only read ACOTAR at the moment, so...
What, like the whole series?
Yeah, I've read all the ACOTAR series, but it's my first dive into Throne of Glass.
Right, so how did it compare to ACOTAR?
I mean, I don't think A Court of Thorn and Roses is the strongest of that series, and I think the same for this one, because I've actually read Crown of Midnight already, and
Okay.
I definitely prefer the second one so far. It's still good, and I can definitely see similarities between the two, between this and ACOTAR, with some of the tropes, like there's the love triangle and sort of like the chosen one sort of thing. But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I think I'm sure Sarah J. Maas was like 19 when she wrote that book.
I thought she was like 16.
Oh, okay, yeah, it might have been.
Yeah,
I just remember she was really young.
She was, and I think it's the first one she wrote out of all the series, which is
Mm.
why it feels a bit more YA than the rest. And I've been told, I think it's after book 3, they get a bit more like new adult.
Yeah, so when I went through like a Sarah J. Maas phase a few years ago, and I remember I read like A Court of Thorns and Roses first, read that trilogy in like a week, and I was absolutely addicted, couldn't put it down. I was like up all night. And then I was like so desperate to read Throne of Glass, but then I was like reading that it wasn't as good, so I was really like wary of it.
Yeah,
and
I
I
found the same
did.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I literally teared through the ACOTAR series, and
So addictive, aren't they?
yeah, I've read the first 2 of these, and I'm a bit like, I do want to read the third one, but I'm not like, oh my god, I need to pick it up now.
So I can't remember how many is there altogether in the Throne of Glass series.
I think there's 7, and then there's one novella.
Yeah, so I've read I reckon I read like I don't know which book it is, but there's like a book that's from Cheo. How'd you say his name? Kale.
Yeah, and I always thought it was Cole.
Yeah, I think that's how I was saying it.
But it's
I hated him. So I got into, I hated him. So I got to like the book. I'm sure I read like 4 back to back, and I read the novella, which I think is the best one, like the one with the short stories. Yeah, and then I just thought like the next book was his book, and it was like really long, and I was like, I can't fucking do that. So I've just never continued.
Didn't like him. I didn't like him at the start.
I have to say I don't like any of the boys in the Throne of Glass series. Although is it Dorian that gets her a puppy? That was quite
yeah,
cute.
He gives I'm probably gonna say her name wrong, Selena, the little puppy, Fleetfoot.
Yeah.
The puppy Fleetfoot though, it's such a weird name. But yeah.
Quite cute, yeah. And they talk about books, don't they? Her and Dorian.
Yeah. I think that's another similar thing between the ACOTAR series and this one. The main characters all seem to like books and reading.
Which is cool.
Yeah, but it does feel a bit like copy repeat.
Yeah. And they do all the men do seem like quite similar. I do quite like that Sarah J. Maas does that thing where she'll have like a character, she'll have like her female strong characters, and they'll fall in love with a guy, and then you'll think that's like the end game, but then it isn't, and then it's like
ripped away from you.
Yeah, I quite like that. I quite like that they get through these men.
That was for good reason.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely.
Alice, are you planning on reading Throne of Glass?
Yeah, so I've kind of had it on my list for a while to buy, but I really quite like the box set. And so I don't know, there's something about spending £50 all in one go that's much scarier than like buying like £5-10 worth of books at different points of the month. And so then she's also come out with new covers, and I think I prefer the new covers, so I think I'm going to wait for that. And coming towards the end of my PhD now, I don't know if I'm actually going to be staying in London, so I'm like trying to get through all of my physical TBR, or most of it, before I move, so I can like unhaul a lot of books. Definitely on the list, but I've heard the opposite, actually, that everyone that I know that's read both ACOTAR and Throne of Glass always preferred Throne of Glass.
I think the later Throne of Glass books are meant to be like insane.
I think there's definitely a mix on the Discord of who's has a favourite series out of the two. It always seems it's either Throne of Glass or ACOTAR. It's never the Crescent series one.
Yeah, from what I've heard, Throne of Glass seems to be her big one. Right, all I hear about is Akatar personally, like on the Discord and Instagram and whatnot. But from other people, they've told me that Akatar's not actually her like big one that Throne of Glass is. So
I think Akatar's more romance, whereas Throne of Glass is more fantasy, I would say.
Yeah.
Now you said that, Sarah. Amy, Akatar obviously is all about, from what I've heard anyway, like Fae and all that sort of thing. Is Throne of Glass similar?
Yeah, there is mention of Fae in Throne of Glass, and it was only a small part of the first one, but after reading the second one, it's definitely coming in more.
What the
So
Fae
I think
are, yeah.
from the next one, it is going to be more of a prominent feature of
What,
it.
the romance?
How do you sell
No,
Maas?
a mention of Fae and
Oh, okay, yeah.
yeah.
I don't think I've never read any of those books. How do you sell that? I mean, the franchise. What series do you prefer, Amy?
I mean, I've only read the first two, so these ones at the moment of Throne of Glass. But if I had to choose now, which I think is a bit unfair on the Throne of Glass series, I would choose the Akatar series.
Interesting.
Just because that was the series that brought me back into fantasy and back into reading. And I think it's always going to have like a little special place in my heart. So that was
Yeah.
Throne of
I'm
Glass.
not big into romance, and so I was really like underwhelmed with the first Akatar book until like the last couple chapters. And if you've read it, I think you know which parts that I'm talking about. And it was only really from book 2 that it properly got like fantasy, and that's when I actually started to like it. And I've heard that it's less like the romance is less of like an element in the Throne of Glass books.
Yeah.
And so that's probably why people have said to me, knowing my reading tastes, that I'd probably prefer Throne of Glass just from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So this is it. How do you sell those theories? Because I'm blood, gore, bad language.
But that's okay. Like I wouldn't. I
Yeah,
wouldn't try
absolutely.
and sell that
Absolutely.
series
But
to you.
what is the? I know that Maas is a massive influence on a lot of readers. So how do?
Yeah.
Is
And
this,
do you know what annoys me is like people will automatically kind of just turn their nose up at it, and it's like it's
Admittedly,
mass
you are
trash,
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
But actually, she's got so many young women into reading. Like honestly, I cannot tell you how many of my real life friends I've recommended that series to, and they've like
Same,
within like
yeah.
a week they're messaging me like I need more.
Do you want me to talk about how the Discord found it, or?
Yeah, definitely.
Please do, yeah.
Okay. So a lot of people, there was a mixed bunch of people who wanted to read it. So I think there were a lot of us that were first time readers of it. And there were a few people that it was a reread. I think because they saw all of us posting all our thoughts about it, they were like, I really want to jump in on this.
Yeah.
But we also had a few people who said they DNF'd it the first time.
Oh, interesting.
I know, yeah. And then because we've all been reading it and we were telling them like it, I think it's about up to chapter 20 or 24. It was a bit boring. But once you get past that, it did really start to pick up. And those people who said they DNF'd it before said that they've actually got through it this time and actually really enjoyed it.
Oh, that's good then.
Which is nice to hear. But we've actually made some threads now in the Maas channel for all of us to carry on reading the next ones.
I need to like. I've got that channel muted. I need to go in there.
It's quite fun. Yeah, I feel like the main people that are like currently commenting are like Melissa, Izzy, and Sally, Erin, and me, because obviously Sally, Melissa, Izzy have already read it. So they're watching all what everyone's saying. They're like, yeah, I think there's going to be quite a few more people reading the next ones.
Novella or the like short story book literally made me fucking sob.
Really?
Honestly, I cried so hard. I think that's like out of all of her books, I think that's her best book. Which is weird because it's like a prequel as well, so it's not even. I can't remember when I read it. I didn't read it before the series, but yeah, I fucking sobbed. It's so fucking soul destroying.
Oh no. Okay, I'm gonna have to get the tissues ready for that one. But what do you think that's the best one out of all the books she's written?
I personally do, yeah. It just really like I just wasn't expecting it, and yeah, I can't really say anything about spoilers, but
Yeah,
I was just so like unbelievably invested.
Okay.
And she,
Oh,
I can't remember her name. Selena. She's a
Selena,
fucking
yeah.
great character. She's such a badass.
Yeah, definitely.
I like her a lot more than
Feyre.
Feyre. Yeah.
She's got more of a backbone to her and more of
Yeah.
an independent.
Well, she's an
vibe.
assassin, isn't she?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that the overall census was that everyone really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And that's really good because like that was her first book, and I remember when I read it I was like, the writing isn't great here, but it gets so much better. And from the books I did read, I know that because I like back to back them and they were really long, the ones that I was getting through, but they just read so quickly,
They do,
like,
yeah.
ridiculously quickly.
Once you get into it, you could probably read it in a couple of days.
You're actually like, you've made me want to go back to the
Do
fucking
it. Come join us
books.
for the threads.
He's so annoying.
I
I'll try
might end up
and do it.
joining you, Amy. You know, you don't know. I could end
Go on,
up.
Damien, you said it now. It's on camera. You're going to come join us.
Oh,
Don't do
well,
it.
it's back to me saying 5 minutes ago. Maybe I should keep my mouth shut.
Well, you can't keep your mouth shut for too long, Damien, because this is your turn, and I feel like you've got your work cut out for you trying to talk
Do
about this
you?
book. Yeah,
Well,
I feel like this is a very hard book to talk about.
It is a very hard book to talk about, and obviously I got the majority of it done today as well. So basically, this book is tomorrow. I initially heard about it a few months ago. Just all I knew about it was about video games, and I'm someone who I like to play video games, not as much as I used to, but I do like video games. And then Sarah, we were speaking a couple of weeks ago, and you asked me if I'd read it, and I said no. And you said I think it's something you'd like. It's about video games for the most part, but it's got this underlying story of a not your typical romance. It's like a love story, but it's not your typical love story. And I don't care for romance in my books at all, but I do like a love story when it feels real, when it feels authentic, it feels true to life. And that's what I don't feel like with a lot of books. They feel very Hollywood, a lot of these romance books. So basically, tomorrow. It's about two people that meet, Sam and Sadie, when they're very young. I think they're about early teens, sort of like 10, 11, 12, that sort of age. And they meet in the hospital and they bond over their shared love of video games. It's in the early 80s, mid 80s. So they're playing games like Super Mario, Donkey Kong, those sort of things. And they've got a very tumultuous relationship. It's not smooth sailing. It spans years and years, and eventually they get into a situation where they're working together on video games because that's their passion. And it reminds me of sort of films like La La Land and stuff like that. I don't know if any of you guys have seen La La Land. But this sort of thing where these two people, they come together and they sort of have this shared connection. That's very beautiful, but things ultimately don't, stand in the way of that, and they can't work through those problems. And it's not a typical love story. Like, it's sold as a video game book, and it is to an extent. They make these video games, and what resonated with me is they pour their heart and their soul into making these video games, and that to me was what I really resonated with. But above that, it is a love story, and not your typical love story. Like, they're in love with each other, they're not in love with each other. Like, one of the characters often remarks that he loves the other person, but love doesn't, perfectly define what he feels for her. It's, what he feels for her is something more than love. And they say to each other, why did we never get with each other? Why did this never work out with us? Why did one of us never make this move on the other? And they say it's because we are, we're big, we're more than that. We're more than just a romance. We've got something more special than that. We're true collaborators in life. And it's sad, but it's also kind of beautiful. And if you're going into it thinking that this is a video game book, it's not what you would expect. Like, when I first heard about it being a video game book, I thought, maybe sort of like Wreck-It Ralph or the film. which is heavy on the video game references, or Ready Player One, which I actually haven't read. I've heard amazing things about. The sequel, not as much. But if you go into expecting a contemporary, true to life, authentic love story, then yeah, that is your bag. And I don't feel like I'm doing it enough justice in that sense. I don't like romance, but this book, it's actually, I didn't expect to like it, but it spoke to me in ways that I never expected it to speak to me, and I honestly thoroughly recommend it. It's a very touching story.
It's like really quite like a profound book.
Yeah, it's very profound.
So I was the same. I didn't really know much about it. My manager at work actually just sent me a picture of it and said, "Oh, do you want me to save the special edition for you?" And I was like, "Yes, of course," because I'm a magpie. And it was a nice cover. And then I took it to Centre Parks with me when I took the kids in the summer. And what's been interesting for me is seeing people in the Discord that have buddy read it. Everyone's been like, "Oh, it's really slow to begin with," because I could not put it down from the beginning. And I'm not a gamer. I appreciate video games, but I'm not a gamer. But there was just something about the way they were describing just everything that they were pouring into making these video games that was just so relatable. And I think that would be true of kind of no matter what your passion is in life, you could really relate to just how much when you love something and it's not just your job, it's everything, is who you are. And it can almost become quite can have an effect on your mental health because you just don't know where to stop.
Almost becomes an obsession.
Yeah, exactly. An obsession.
If anything traumatic happened to any of the characters, they worked through their pain, and that's how they dignified it. They would say, we work through our pain, and our pain makes us become stronger. It makes our work become stronger.
Yeah.
And it was just it was honestly, for someone who doesn't care for those sort of things, it was beautiful.
And the way they explain, the way they describe the games, the first one they made was the little baby that escapes from the shipwreck.
The Shigo.
Yeah. And their friendship was just it's a love story, but it's not a love story.
Yeah,
but it's so much.
It's not conventional by any means, is it? And you can tell, they love each other. They are in love with each other. But it's as true to life, sometimes those things life's not a Hollywood romance movie or Hollywood romance smut book and all that. You don't end up with the perfect person. You don't end up with the person you want to end up with. And these people, they're very clearly, in my perspective anyway, because they bring out the best in each other, they also bring out the worst in each other as well. But they're very clearly soulmates in this book. But it's just one of them things you need to read it. It's very true to life, and it's very, very, very raw, very emotionally raw. And as someone who doesn't really care for those sort of things, for that to speak to me, because like you said, Chris, earlier, you like your blood, you like your gore, you like your battles, and I also like my quests, and I for that to speak to me, for someone that earlier who said I don't like romance, that is a very, very good book that spoke to me on so many different levels. There's one excerpt where one of the characters, Marx is his name, and he remarks that, and it's a very juvenile mindset, but it's also quite accurate, that he looks at life there's all these different foods out there, and I would like to try this food, and I would like to try this, and I would like to try that. Why do I need to commit to this one thing? When I could try this buffet every day. And he looked at that how he looked at lovers. And later on, one of the characters remarks that just because you've had a relationship with one person that's lasted 10 years and you've had one with someone that's lasted a month, it doesn't mean that the one person that you had with for a month means any less than the person that you had with for 10 years. They both mean different things. They both affect you in different ways. And it's just, I'm sorry, I'm gushing right now, but it's very, very, very accurate to life and what people go through and what people may experience.
It's the comparable experience.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Very comparable, yeah. I didn't expect to like it. I just thought, video game. I like video games, and I thought, I'm going to get a lot of video game references from this, and it did have video game references. And like I said, I was expecting sort of like a Wreck-It Ralph sort of thing, but it really was this emotionally raw, profound love story, true to life. And I can't big it up enough. It was very good.
From what I've seen from people reading it as well, it's like had quite an effect on quite a few people, because I didn't know if it was just something that really spoke to my soul when I read it. Because I remember when I finished it, like I said, I was at Centre Parks and I was like giving the kids loads of money on the like arcade thing so that they would just go and play so I could like finish this book. And I remember reading it and just, when you just like finish a book and you're just like, wow, that's like really had an effect on me.
Definitely. Like I said, it gave me those La La Land vibes,
Yeah.
It gave me really like heavy vibes from that.
And from what I've seen of the people reading it in the Discord, quite a few people are like, when is this going to like get going? Or like, when is this going to start to pick up? And then it gets to a point and they're like, fuck. And then a lot of them that have finished have been like, I know Izzy, I was talking to Izzy earlier, or she sent me something and she named it as one of her favourite books. She read it this month and she was someone that was struggling with it to start with. Shannon has put it in one of her books of the month. Like, it's just, I think it's just been named as like book of the year for I can't remember what it was, but it's won a book of the year. So yeah, everyone go and read it. Like, it's not something that you might not think that you would like, but definitely worth reading.
Like it, but I'm walking, talking truth of that. That's not my sort of thing. And for me to come away from that and say, wow, that is spectacular. Definitely read it. And you said earlier, Sarah, about sorry, not earlier, just now, that people in the Discord were saying, when's this going to pick up? When's this going to get going? And no disrespect to anyone in the Discord, but for me personally, as soon as I started reading it, as soon as that relationship started unfolding between the people, between the two main characters and the guy in the wings as well, so to speak, it just gripped me. It's very slow burn at first, but once it's only 390 pages, once it does kick in, it does go.
Wow. It's very character driven, very character driven.
And the character development in it is fantastic, very good. Every character goes through a really good character arc, and they end up with a satisfying conclusion. And fantastic.
Really, I also think it's like something that most people. I think it's like when you read a book with like a romance and you're like, oh, I wish that could be me. I wish that could happen to me. Like with this, it's kind of like, it's just so much more than that. It's so hard to explain without giving spoilers, but just read it.
It's very otherworldly, sort of ethereal. It's not your typical romance. It's not your Hollywood romance. It's very raw. Very raw.
It's very focused on mental health as well.
Yeah, extremely so. It's never stated. Main character, if he's the main character, it's a few main characters. Wouldn't be surprised if he was on the spectrum. It's never stated though, because he doesn't understand love. So he does, but he doesn't understand how to pronounce his love. But as he goes on, he starts to, become more comfortable with that, and it's very, very heavy on the mental health. It's a very good representation of mental health, I believe, as well.
Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it, Damien.
There is something about an unconventional love story though that is epic. I love reading gore and the nasty stuff, but an unconventional love story is amazing if it's done right.
I think it's because that's what most of us have. I don't think any of us have like these like book romances, do we really? As much as we want a resand, we're never fucking getting one. Like most of us do have like the unconventional, like life doesn't look like how society and the media portray it should for a lot of us. So I think it's just, and I think there's something like, even if it's not kind of like in the same dynamic that these two characters had, sometimes you just like you can have like a soulmate relationship that's not, it could be like with a family member, or it could be with like your best mate. It just
like platonic.
Well, that's funny you should say that, Amy, as well, because one of the characters actually does say, so what if you two aren't romantic, you two have a friendship, that in my opinion supersedes all of that. It supersedes a romantic relationship. Your friendship with each other is that touching, is that special, is that amazing, you know. Who cares if it's romantic, you know, because that is much more special than, you know, a sexual relationship with someone, or, you know, it's just, yeah, please,
profound relationship.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
recommend anyone to read it. It really is very beautiful. It will make you consider, it will make you think, it will make you reconsider a lot of things about your life as well. Definitely so.
You've really made me want to read it now. It wasn't one that was on my radar. I knew about it, but it wasn't one that I wanted to read. Like,
Oh, you should.
it wasn't high on my TBR, but now you've been talking about it.
It's
I'm
not
like,
a book that fits
actually,
into any like genre either. I think
yeah.
that's why some
It
people
doesn't
might be
fit
reluctant to
genre,
pick it
yeah,
up.
that's right. It really doesn't.
But yeah, Amy, read it and let us know.
I
your
will.
thoughts. And you too, Alice and
All you
Chris.
guys, read it. You know, it might not be your usual genre, might not be your usual style, but I generally believe it will speak to you in ways that, yeah, it will speak to you. Definitely, it will speak to your soul.
Speak to your soul.
It does. It speaks to your soul.
Listen, I read Cormac McCarthy, so that's a book I probably will read tomorrow.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Right, I'm so excited to talk about the next book, Alice. You have no idea. So you are here this evening to talk about The Way of Kings. I read this last month. You've read it this month.
Yeah, so I've got my copy here. I've got the paperback version of yours. Yeah, so by Brandon Sanderson. And so this is the first installment in the Stormlight Archives series. And I think from Instagram and from the Discord that whenever you say that you're reading a Brandon Sanderson book, like that is the most highly anticipated. Like everyone is so excited to hear all of your thoughts. I think Sanderson's always really known for his unique magic systems. But for this, especially because it's quite a chunky book, a lot of the sort of epic fantasies that I've read that are quite big and heavy on the world building have glossaries. And so the first thing I did the day I picked it up was I flicked to the back and I was like, oh no. I was like, okay, so this is a learn as you go experience. Yeah, so I've only really read the first two books in his Skyward series before. And so
that's very different, isn't it?
Very
YA in comparison, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that, I don't know, I was a little bit apprehensive starting this one just because everyone is so completely excited about this series and loves this series so much. Yeah, and so from the Discord, sort of everyone had loads of great theories floating around. There was so many, like you get so far through the book or finish one, like part one, part two, and then everyone was like putting their theories of what was going to happen with the characters next and putting the spoilers on. And so there was quite a few people that were massive Sanderson fans, and particularly Stormlight Archives fans that were in the chat. And so they were getting really excited seeing all of our theories, and some of the theories like were really, really like well fleshed out. So it was interesting to see what everyone was like really thinking about as they were reading. But yeah, everyone really loved it. They said especially like the world building, and the main thing that people said when they finished it was that they felt like it was an achievement because it's such a big book. I mean, this copy that I've got, because it's the smaller version, is like 1,250 pages. So it really feels like some parts of it, I think when it is a little bit slower, you're like trying to make yourself feel a little better, being like, how much have I got left? Like 800 pages.
Yeah.
That in the Discord, that there was like pretty much everybody that read it, I think, gave it 5 stars. They absolutely loved it. And it was even to the point where I think one of the members like made a playlist, and the other was I think one of the days was commenting saying that she was really, really mad that her brother was like throwing a baby gender reveal party that interrupted her reading. So there was like loads of like angry messages while she was at that. So I thought that was quite funny. But yeah, loads of people gave it 5 stars, and a lot of them actually jumped straight into book 2, which I think is always a good sign. Yeah, and I think they jumped in because like the way that it ends, it really sets up very nicely for book 2, I feel like, and it also leaves a lot of important questions unanswered that makes you want to go, oh, I need to read the next one. So it's felt like such a task just getting through it because it's such a big book, but then as soon as you finish it, it's like you almost completely forget about it and you want to go straight on to the next one. Yeah, and so I don't like it. I don't really know how to like it's so sort of complex that it's hard to kind of break it down into smaller parts. But I think for me, like when I started it, because I'd only read the Skyward series, which, like Damien said, it is much more YA. And the fact that it had 3 starts to the book, I was like, is this thing ever gonna properly start? Like the fact that it's got like a prologue and a prelude, and then the book properly starts. So you've already seen so many different
I'm not sure which one it was, but the prologue or the prelude with Seth.
Yes.
I was hooked. I was instantly hooked.
Yeah, the prologue was so good. Yeah, because I don't know. I think I was even hooked from the prelude. So it happens like 4,500 years before the actual book starts.
Very confusing,
yeah.
Yeah.
And like it's kind of like it throws you almost like into the middle of the action. You don't know what's happened before, and it kind of opens with this like devastating and like bloody battle that's happened between like humans and these other creatures, and you kind of have these like mysterious characters that sort of mentioned leaving their, I don't know, like their roles in this fight and leaving the world and the humans in the hands of the Radiants. And then it jumps forward 4,000 years, and then, like you said, you meet Seth, and he's well, spoiler alert, I guess, like commissioned to kill the king by this other group called the, how do you say it, like the Parshendi? And so the killing of the king is it happens with like this like magical sword basically called a shard blade that manifests out of thin air, and it's sort of like bonded to the wielder, I guess. And so it had kind of been alluded to in the prelude, and so you're like, oh, so they really did leave, and then all of their magical items like now sort of with the humans. So you don't really know what's gone on there, but you're obviously like, oh well, I guess that's what we're sort of gonna find out as we read on.
And his like inner dialogue through that scene, because he's like, I just wish that he could kill me. But, well, I shouldn't really give spoilers, but
yeah,
it's so like you just want to know why. Why is he in this situation?
Why is he in this situation? Yeah, truthless. Yeah, it's yeah.
He seems like really like forced to do it, and that he doesn't he doesn't want to. And so you're like, oh, there's obviously some things that are going on in the background that we don't really understand. And so basically his killing of the king is sort of sets into motion, I think, the main plot of the story. So that starts 5 years after that prologue. And so the way that it starts, I guess you've kind of seen how the world's changed and the consequences of the murder of the king, and how this has sort of fueled a war with this, I don't know, I'm in my head I kind of call them a race, the Parshendi. And I think it's like a really interesting book. I really quite like multiple point of view books. Because I really like, once you get so far through, you start to like piece the bits together of what's happening with all the different characters. And so you've got like the four main characters. You've got Dalinar. So he's essentially a high prince in the kingdom where the king was murdered. And a high prince is kind of like, I kind of think of him as like an army general, and he kind of oversees like a faction within that kingdom. And then another one of the main characters is his son Adolin. And then you kind of switch into other parts of the world with the other two sort of main point of view characters. So you've got Kaladin, who's like an ex-army man, and sort of when you meet him, he has become a slave for supposedly killing a Light Eyes, or someone that's sort of associated with the High Princes. But I really liked his character because you have a lot of flashbacks with that as well. So it's kind of like building up the story and building up the world a lot more gradually, I think, as you go. And I think that was probably one of the main ways that Sanderson sort of like explained a lot of his world building was through these flashbacks. And I actually really didn't like Kaladin to start with. I was like,
What?
oh, yeah.
Seriously? One of the best
What,
characters
Alice?
of all time.
No, I didn't like him to begin with. Then once
Fuck
we
Kaladin.
got to the war
Ah.
camps, once you got to the war camps, then I started to like him because I was like,
Did he not
"Oh,
remind you of Fitz?
no, not quite."
Really?
He really reminds me of Fitz,
Yeah,
like so
he reminds
tortured.
me of Fitz a lot as well. Very similar to Fitz, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would say after finishing the book now, I would definitely say that I see the similarities with Fitz. And there was lots of things actually in this book that sort of reminded me of other parts of Hob. So I was actually discussing with Max that the final sort of main point of view character that you have is a female character called Shallan, and she actually so her sort of story is that she's like an aspiring scholar and her father's died and her family's sort of close to ruin. And so she kind of goes on this big journey to become a ward for a princess, and that's like infamous for being a heretic in their society. And she wants to go there to sort of steal something valuable that's like a sort of magical device called the Soul Caster, so that she can ensure that her family survives and has a future. And I was saying to Max that she really reminded me of Althea from the Live Ship Traders, because it's kind of almost like similar. Like when you first meet her, it's kind of like a similar story arc, right? It's like she's going on a journey to kind of save her family from ruin.
Yeah.
So I really liked her from the start, and then I didn't like her as much towards the end. But then the last few chapters, I was like, okay, I'm back on board with her now. But yeah, and I think that it was like really interesting read because the magic system was so interesting. Like I really liked the idea of the spren like popping up everywhere. I thought that gave it like a real like interesting like extra bit of magic to the world, and sort of where it's set with the war on the Shattered Plains, like with
Such
all
a cool setting as well, the Shattered Plains, isn't it? It's a really cool setting.
Yeah, and like the idea of them having to like do this war using these men to carry these bridges to cross over to do the fighting is like, yeah, it was really different to sort of any book that I've read before. And yeah, I think like all the characters seem like really convoluted, and that's something that I really personally like, and I think that's a reason why I like Hobbes so much, that there's like all these layers that you feel that are going to be revealed with the characters, and I quite like that you feel like you can't really guess where it's going to go, I think.
Definitely.
But
it really reminded me of like old war films. I don't really know, but Kaladin's chapters.
Yeah.
Where he was just so fucking like down and out, and you're like, how much more shit is going to happen to him?
Yeah. And that's what I thought with the bridge crews as well. It very much like World War One with they were going over the top of the trenches, and they were fighting over towards the other trenches. They're getting mowed down by machine guns.
They've literally got no chance. Yeah.
No chance. Yeah, and that's what the bridge boys were doing. You know, they're going in front of the armies with the bridges above their heads. You know, they were getting mowed down by Parshendi archers, and it was just very brutal, very dark, and very much like World War One.
It kind of reminded me of like in like was it World War II, the beach landings.
Because
as it's put down, you're kind of completely exposed to the line of fire. So that's definitely like.
And it really had that like emotional effect on me. Like the stakes were so high. It's the best book I've read this year. Like I had no plans to read it. And then it was like the readathon month, and I just took some time off Discord and didn't bother with the readathon. And then I was like, I need to read like a really long book. And like, because I hadn't really had good experiences with Sanderson, I was a bit wary, but literally from that first prelude or prologue, I was absolutely hooked. And then like it was all I could think about. You know, when you're like you're reading a book and you've got that feeling like you're going to work and you just can't wait to get home. You can't wait to get in bed and like pick your book up.
Like for me, I was so excited to like. I'd literally say to my lab mates, like, I just can't wait wait to get home because I need to. Like,
it's very special. Like that doesn't come around much. And those last 200 pages, like I'm literally welling up thinking about it.
Like,
but
it
when
was
I
just hit after hit after hit, and I was like, where is this going? I really just can't see.
Perfect. Like I dropped my kids off at school in the morning and then came home and I was like, I'm just gonna read a chapter while I have a cup of tea and then I'll get on and do things. And then it was like 2:30 and I'd finished the book and I had to leave. I had to like run out the door.
There's that one last chapter, I think it's the last long chapter in the book, and you're like, okay, I know that this is literally like the end of like the main part of the book and the beginning of like all the Sanderlaunch, as people call it. And really, really good. I really glad that I read it, because also it's like one that sits on your shelf and it kind of stares at you because it's so good for such a long time.
It looks very intimidating, like it's chunky, but it's not. It's really not. It's like so much more readable than like most books I've read this year. Like I can't get over it. I literally cannot get over it. It's definitely just.
I've said before, when I've done my review for Way of Kings, I've read all of the Song of Ice and Fire books, and I've read the Yaldabaoth, well, most of the Yaldabaoths. But apart from, I've soured on it a bit in recent years, the Song of Ice and Fire books, because of how the series went and because of how long he's taken with the rest of the books. But pound for pound, that is the most impressive book series I've ever read. Discount the TV show from it, but then I read Way of Kings and I thought, wow, the world building, the character, the magic system, this is the most impressive book in terms of scope that I've ever read. And then when I read Words of Radiance later that month, well, a couple of weeks later, best book I've ever read in my life, Words of Radiance, 100%. And just that whole series, but Way of Kings especially, it's just such an impressive book, and it's just incredible.
I agree, and like I think that as somebody that likes to read like a big, chunky, heavy, epic fantasy book, I was really mad starting it, like I said, because it didn't have a glossary, but I'm actually really glad that it doesn't, because it really does keep you there, and it doesn't make the first part of the book difficult. Like you just kind of have to accept while you're reading it, like, okay, I guess I'll get it as I go along. And sometimes that's quite nice. And I think that you build like a better relationship with the characters from the start. And I think that you pay a bit more attention to the foreshadowing and things. So I can't remember who it was in the chat, but I was throwing out some really big like what I thought was going to happen, and spoilering it, and everyone was like, wow, Alice, I'm like really impressed with your theories of what's going to happen. And I was like, wow, that's a first. Usually I'm just like happy to go along for the ride, but like with this, my brain was worrying, or like while I'm in work I'm thinking about it, and then all these theories start popping up, and then I'm like on the Discord messaging whilst I'm like waiting for things in the lab, being like, oh, I think that actually maybe this might be happening, and that's why this might happen. And it's a really good one to sort of get you thinking.
I think the like special, like I get it now, and like I get why he's so like beloved, because I think even though it's very complex and it's like like this huge story with so much world building, it's very, very accessible. And like I feel like anybody could pick, because I love fantasy, but sometimes I'll read fantasy books, I'm like, I don't have a fucking clue what's going on here. Or it's like really like you need to like be able to concentrate and focus so much. When I read this, my head was not in the state to be able to focus on something, but it's so accessible and so easy to read, but just has such like an impact on you. Like I definitely think, like I understand why he's kind of like the entry point for so many people for fantasy books. And I did compare him to Sarah J. Maas, which I think people took as an insult, but I like really meant it as a compliment.
Yeah,
because his writing style is so easy.
Is on that level with Sanderson. I haven't read a lot of Sanderson, but that's the kind of comparison you get when, especially on the Discord, it seems like there's a lot of Maas, Brand, Sanderson. It's a big level of.
I would say Sanderson is for adult fantasy what Maas is for like the romantic fantasy. 100%.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think Sanderson is a bit more wordy and a bit more focused on world building, though, compared to Maas.
It never feels like, I don't know.
It's really hard to describe with Sanderson, I think.
It is.
Yeah,
I think
because
that he's really good at like making convoluted characters that you like. You know that like for Shallan, for example, like that's why I started to not like her, because she was starting to do things that I didn't like, I didn't agree with. But then he kind of brings it back, and like you can see why they're doing it, even though like you don't agree with it. And I think that is really good writing, that you would stay with a character because of that.
The mental health rep in that book as well was just like stunning. Kaladin, a lot of people say that characters are not Sanderson's strength, but Kaladin is literally one of the best characters I've ever read. I love him.
Dalinar as well. As someone who's read the rest of the series that's currently out, Dalinar's amazing. Dalinar's really fucking good. And Adelin's very douchey in the first book. He's like your jock, like he's popular. The ladies love him. He's a good warrior and all of this, and everyone loves him. But he's a bit of a dick about it. Without getting into spoilers too much for the rest of the series, I've often said that Adeline is the Steve Harrington from Stranger Things of the story.
Whoa.
Yeah. And everyone who's watched Stranger Things loves Steve. Steve is the best character.
Steve is the best character.
And I wouldn't say Adeline's the best because Kaladin exists, but in terms of character trajectory and likability and how the story goes, and Adeline is the Steve Harrington of Stranger Things. I remember putting it in the Cosmere tab on the Discord, and Max and a few other people agreed. Dean didn't agree because
Dean does not like Adeline.
Dean does not like Adeline, but he loves Steve.
Dean was messaging me like, Sarah, you hate Adeline, don't you? I was like, yes, Dean.
Yeah, but I like Adeline. I've got a soft spot for him. I do see him as the Steve Harrington of Stormlight.
I don't like him yet, but I will say that like I really enjoyed every chapter. There was not a POV that I wanted to skip.
You probably didn't like Steve at the start of Stranger Things, because in season 1 of Stranger Things, Steve was
I fucking love Steve. Right, Damien, if you're telling me that Adeline is going to do a Steve, I'd be so disappointed if that doesn't happen.
Steve's there in season 1. He's got his quiffed up hair. He looks like Jean Ralphio from Parks and Rec, and he gets beat up by Jonathan, the social recluse. So you're like, Steve, get nice, Steve, you're pathetic, and all this. But then Steve becomes amazing, and that's like Adeline. Adeline is a dick. He's a bit pathetic.
This better happen now.
But his patheticness is actually quite charming later on, and it's I love
We'll see.
He's my top 3 Stormlight characters, definitely. Kaladin, Shadan, and Adeline.
Oh, I love Syl though.
Syl's great, especially when she says in Way of Kings when she trips up the guards. But yeah, Adeline, Shadan, and Kaladin. Watch that.
Okay.
Dalinar's fantastic too.
Watch this space. Chris, have you not read it then?
I've got it sitting here.
Have you read any other Sanderson?
Mistborn.
Yeah, see, I read the first Mistborn book and I did not. It was okay.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. But it's the same with because I've read Mistborn. The only thing I can compare it to is Jesus, now I've forgotten what it is. It's like the Anthony Ryan books. Waking Fire, I didn't really get on with.
Yeah.
And those sort of early starters, but the Covenant of Steel stuff I love. I love. So that's how I imagine Sanderson's going to be for me when I start.
I think like having tried his Mistborn books and his Skyward books, and kind of like maybe I was just like resigning myself to the fact that, because I was saving Sanderson for when I finished Hob, like it was like what was keeping me going. And then when I finished Hob and I read Mistborn, I was just a bit like, this isn't fucking the same.
Well, this is what I was saying. I was 60. I was ridiculously young when I read Mistborn, and then
Yeah.
I didn't touch Sanderson, so the comparability is not really.
I'm really surprised you didn't like it, Sarah, the Mistborn.
I liked it. I just didn't
Yeah.
love it. Like, bearing in mind, like, since I've started Bookstagram in, I don't know how long it's been, like 2 years, I reckon I've had more messages from people telling me that I need to read Sanderson than any others. And I was reading Hob, and I was like, I'm gonna wait until I finished Hob, and then I'm gonna get through all. I was gonna do it like in the right order, like read all the Mistborn books, Mistborn Era 2, read all the standalones, and then I was gonna read Stormlight. I liked Mistborn. It just didn't really do anything for me. But I did read after the Way of Kings, I read Warbreaker, which was really good. That was like a it was very romantic as well, which I wasn't expecting.
With the Mistborn ones, have you literally just read the first one?
I've only read the first one, yeah. I will go back to it. I feel like I might appreciate it more now.
That's the thing. I read Mistborn, and I liked Mistborn 1, Final Empire. I thought it was decent. Number 2, Wow of Ascension, get in the bin. Did not like that. Can't stand Vin. Can't stand it ends.
Ooh, that is a hot take, Damien.
Yeah, really
Everyone loves
like
Vin.
No, Vin. She's good in number 1. Number 2 onwards, go away. Right?
Yeah.
Sarzed, now that is someone to like. Sarzed is a character. Sarzed's the most likable character from that series. And I like a guy called Breeze as well. Breeze is an interesting character. Calcia as well, but we won't get into Calcia for spoiler reasons. But yeah.
Have you read them all, Amy?
I've only read the first 3 Mistborn because I'm following the reading order that I found.
Yeah.
I think the next one I've got to read is it Elantris?
Yeah. So
I did want to read. Pardon?
Are you a big fan?
I'm not a massive fan, but I really did enjoy Mistborn, everyone. And I was going to read The Were Kings, but I didn't want to mess up my reading order. So
yeah, no, that's.
I'm a big stickler for reading order, and this was the like I say, reading the blurbs. I was like, I'm really not that interested in Mistborn, and so I was like, The Way of Kings just sounds right up my street. So that I'm just going to start with that.
I'm so glad I didn't just like be like, nah, he's not for me, and read this one because it's a million times better than the other ones that I've read of his. But I am going to go back and do Mistborn again. I think maybe I just wasn't in the right. I think I had just finished Assassin's Fate as well, so anything was going to have a hard time, especially the thing that I had like built up the most to be what was going to be my replacement.
I definitely think you need to be able to concentrate on what's happening, because otherwise you're going to miss something.
We're going to move on to the last book, and this is the only book of the whole that I haven't read, which I'm quite gutted about. But maybe, Chris,
read as well, you were, Sarah.
Maybe you're finally going to get me to read it. Yes, I was second for the buddy read, and I failed.
have been badgering you about reading it for a while as well.
Really, really good, really good.
Come on then, Chris.
I don't know where to start with this book. Do you know what? It's one of those books, and I was a kid that was brought up in the 80s. So Lost Boys, Interview with the Vampire was 90s, but there was a strong sort of vampiric movie scene, story scene that was just it was epic. It was like the fairy tale.
Twilight?
Yeah, no.
He said he bought up in the 80s and the 90s, Sarah. You're good at that
No,
literally
not on any level is it anything like Twilight.
No. That just, I don't know who that audience was that made that so successful.
Me, I was that audience.
No, you are that audience.
Vampires are vampires. Gritty, nasty, horrible, brutal things. And this book, I got how great vampires were. I think until I read this book, it kind of, as I was reading it, I was like, this is the thing that makes that genre, subgenre, whatever you want to call it, absolutely great again. And I'm sure that on the message I said to Damien that it fits the movies, whether he was writing it for a movie, whatever he was doing, it's brought the genre back for me personally to a place where it should have been.
Wow.
I think it really goes back to like the original like lore around vampires and the dark and the really creepy. I was actually I think I got about 50 pages in, and already I was mad that I'd read it in August instead of reading it in October. I think it's like the perfect spooky season read. It's like it's just set in such like a dark world from page one that it's phenomenal. I think it's my favorite book that I've read this year, actually.
Oh wow.
I'd fully agree with you.
And Alex, you say it harkens back to that really creepy, like scary thing that vampires should be. There's one. It's one of the very early chapters where the main character Gabe, he's in a village hunting vampires, and there's tap 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 at the window, and there's a little boy, and he's going, "Let me in, let me in," and it's really creepy. And that's how vampires in lore. You know, you have to invite a vampire into your home to for them to come into your house, otherwise you can't let them in. And that's something that Kristoff he reiterates in his book, and it's just so creepy. It's a little boy at the window tapping at the window, going, let me in, and he's got a very like malicious look in his eye, and it's just
he was feeding off his mother. That's the thing.
He was.
And she was willing to brutalize Gabe to like let her son in. Absolutely perfect. Just grimy. Vampires should be like that. They're evil. They're historically evil.
So is he actually evil then? I mean, Gabe.
I wouldn't say so. I think like you were saying that Kaladin reminds you of Fitz. I think that Gabe is like a Fitz.
Whoa.
Gabe has a lot of trauma. He has a
very
lot of
much
trauma,
so. It's very dark, and like I think that so I've never actually read any J. Kristoff before this book, and I think that the way that he wrote it was it's all being told as like Gabe is telling a story about the past. And it's
because I've seen comparisons to Name of the Wind.
So I haven't read that.
Yes, very similar actually. Now you said that, very similar.
The setup is him telling it. It starts as the thing is, and one of the the great things about this book is there's sort of two timelines, but there's three timelines because it starts as him in a prison, in a vampire prison, asking a vampiric, whatever you want to call it, a historian to recite his history, his story of how he came to this thing, and it goes on two timelines, but that's the sort of Name of the Wind. It starts in the inn. He tells his story. He recites it. People take it in, and you get the reaction from that scene, as well as the 16-year-old Gabe to the 30-year-old Gabe, 35-year-old Gabe. It crosses those sort of timelines, but perfectly as well. It's one of those books that has done it sort of seamlessly. You wait for every timeline, but as soon as it jumps back, it's not discombobulating it. As soon as it jumps back to that timeline, you're waiting for it, you know where you are. You pick it up straight away. It's perfect. He's done it.
Fantastic book. It really is.
I think because it's not actually written though, like he's telling his past, but he doesn't tell his past in order. So like one minute you're with him as he's 16, the next minute you're with him as he's 30. And it's like all of these storylines are all starting to weave into one. And like as the book goes on, you're starting to like understand more of his past and like how he got to where he was. I think basically all of the stories for like the rest of the series will sort of be leading up to how he ended up telling this historian his life story, basically. And I think it's interesting because Gabe in the book is supposed to be half vampire, so that's like a big thing where like a vampire, usually a male, I think by the sounds of it, will mate with a human female, and then they have half vampire children, and those children are taken almost by this like religious, I don't want to use the word cult, but sect. I'm going to go for sect. And they sort of, it's really like atmospheric. They take them almost to like a monastery and they train them to kill vampires. And one of my favorite parts of the whole book, and I think that this is seen throughout the art that's seen in all the pages throughout the book, is that they become what's known as silver clad. So they get these really elaborate tattoos all over their body that the ink is all silver. And when they actually fight the vampires, when they are, I can't remember exactly what the deity is that they call it in the book because I read it months ago, but basically they have like the light of the deity shines out of the silver tattoos. And so like the pictographic reading that is in the dark, because the world is sort of like one day everyone wakes up and it's all dark and the sun doesn't really come out anymore, and that's how the vampires are all coming out. So every single scene from the off is set in the dark, and so just the visual of this like topless warrior with all these amazing tattoos completely glowing with silver light is just like such an incredible picture when you're reading it, I think.
Definitely. And there's one scene as well, I won't dive too much into it, but it's one of my favorite things in sort of like fantasy is religious warriors fighting against evil, like paladins, that sort of thing, priests. And there's one scene with a priest, and he's got his symbol of religion, and he's beating back all of these swarms of vampires, and they were attacking them. There's a group of like 6 of them, and there's a swarm of vampires attacking, like, and it's just amazing the way his faith is holding against them. And the second his faith breaks is when the dynamic shifts, and it's just badass and it's epic in so many different ways.
Yeah, and I think it's quite nice as well because there's such this like religious aspect to the book that when you jump forward from Gabe after he's gone through his training and things to when he's about 30, he doesn't really believe anymore. He kind of questions the religion and his training and everything. So there's like a lot of like moral conundrums that he's going through as the book goes along, which is quite nice. And I quite enjoyed that part.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And the book has some of the best character development I've ever read.
Yeah.
There's one character in particular. He's Draco Malfoy, but better.
Yes.
He is Malfoy, but a million times better. And his character development and a character that he's tied with, it's just incredible and just a pure joy to read and to witness.
Yeah, that whole relationship.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's brilliant.
But, and that's one of the subtle geniuses of this book. I think all the side characters, they're given a little nod and a tip to, and they're explored, but some of them are just done so superbly that it makes the book more than it should be. Like those 2 characters, I think, Damien, I think they're developed so well.
Yeah.
You think that's going to end so quickly, or you're going to think that's going to be, that's going to end in a fight, that's going to be what there is. But the way that develops and it blossoms is just done so superbly.
It is. It really
it makes the book, and the way it's fleshed out in the timeline. Yeah. Those characters develop in the timelines of the book. Do you know what? I reached out to Jay Kristoff about this book. I was like, I'm going to be involved in a YouTube Discord, and I'm well ahead here. Like, how am I gonna come across? Like, I just like books. That's me. And he was like, just talk from your heart. Yeah. Talk about the 2 timelines, the 3 timelines, and maybe end with a good quote. That was him. That was it. There was nothing else. There was nothing to like go into this. There's no insight. That book for me is definitely my favorite read of this year, and done so well that it'd be hard to top.
Yeah,
just like you said, that the development between those 2 characters, it's just so it's just amazing. It really is. It really is special, and it's amazing. And you don't expect it to happen. You keep thinking with the other character, you keep thinking it's going to end badly. This guy's a dick.
Yeah.
And just the way it progresses, you just think, Jesus Christ, that was incredible. That was so good. And there's another bit. It's mentioned very early from the start. It's called The Darkest Day. I'm not going to spoil it. And it's referenced many times throughout the book. Gabe, what are you going to tell us about the darkest day? And in all timelines, he thinks about the darkest day. And when it comes to at the end of the book, heartbreaking, it's emotional, it's epic, and it's just like, I did not see any of that coming, but I also saw it coming. But it's so heartbreaking that I didn't want it to come. I
Like,
didn't expect it to come.
You read a bit more and you kind of get an inkling and you're like, no,
Yeah.
please no, please no. And you
Yeah.
kind of reading to
Please,
kind of
this isn't
make
happening.
yourself
Yeah.
feel better that that's not going to happen. And then it does, and you're completely heartbroken.
When you get to that chapter that's called The Darkest Day, and you think, oh God, no, it's going to happen. It's about to happen. Oh,
It's the key
man.
of repetition, though, as well. It's like simple things like repetition works with babies and it works with readers. Like he tells when he's being interviewed, when he's reciting the history, he says patience.
Yeah, patience.
And he says it multiple times, and then
does.
patience happens, and it's like, oh,
Come on, you've got to get to it. He's like, patience.
that's it, like game over. And
Yeah.
he does it with the characters as well. He does it with the cup. He says, oh, stop. Or he does it with the bard.
The bard,
Shut the fuck up, bard. And it goes on through the book, like just simple things like that. And that's massively effective. Like the repetition. Amazing. Well written. So well written.
Yeah,
How The Darkest Day ties into past timeline Gabe with another character as well. It's beautiful. It really is.
Yeah,
Sorry, as you were saying.
it's quite gritty. I think like when you meet Gabe, even at the start, it's almost like the world's version of like he's an alcoholic and like a drug addict almost. And so it's like kind of he's a very like brash and harsh character, I think, almost all the way through the book, even when he's like a teenager, because of the sorts of things that he has to go through. And I don't know, I think it's almost like once you get so far through, it's almost endearing, I think. And it's something that you expect from him. And so when he does show a nice side, even like all the other characters in the book are like, why are you being nice? It's weird.
Well, the massive thing I got from this as well is that I went online and tried to have a look at the reviews for this, and Jay Kristoff put a review out that said it's not for kids, and he repeats that it's not for kids, it's not for kids, it's not for kids, but he says it's Interview with a Vampire, cross Name of the Wind, cross something else. I forget, but he specifically specifies it's not for kids. And I also read another review that was like it's incredibly misogynistic, which I get. It's not for everyone, but I kind of find the way that Jay Kristoff wrote it was kind of had to be a little bit. Definitely. It was in a time where women were nuns, or it was it was that time in history where in that particular fantasy history, that women weren't at the forefront of things. They were the
support, so to speak.
Yeah.
Identified that a lot as well, because so Astrid is one of the sort of characters you come to love, and she is basically, without spoilering, she is a nun, but she's like quite rebellious. She's from sort of a money background. She didn't really have to be there in the first place, and so she's like quite rebellious. Like she's smoking drugs in the library at midnight and things like that. And so those characters of the nuns that he made actually ended up being quite strong characters, and they got involved in some of the big parts of the plot of Gabe's character development as well, for lots of various reasons. And so I think that was kind of his comment on not making it, like, because of the time and how it was set was much more how things used to be in the past. I think that was his like way of kind of not just completely going into the time and the misogyny of the time and allowing like female
female.
Yes, that's true. Yeah,
exactly. There's a lot of the most capable characters in that book are female. A lot of the characters that help Gabe get out of certain situations are female. As Chris said, a lot of the badass female vampires are female. And yeah.
Well, I know what I'm doing tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Get to it, Sarah.
I've literally been saying to Sarah since I finished reading the book, one of the first things I did after finishing it was I Gave it 5 stars on Goodreads, and I messaged Sarah. Was like, "Oh my god, you gotta read this book."
I've seen so many people give this book 5 stars. I don't think I've seen anyone like give it less. Even Dean, me and Dean, right when this book was like first coming out. I know this sounds really awful, but I read Jay Kristoff's review of it on Goodreads, and it was like blood-sucking blowjobs, and I was just like, nah, I'm not reading that. And then I instantly was like, sorry.
I put it off for ages. I
Yeah.
thought the cover was trashy.
Yes, I thought it was getting trashy and smutty.
Yeah.
And then Dean has just read
That
it for this
changed
buddy
my mind.
read, and he's obviously like, he's very like me. We have literally exactly the same taste in books, and he's absolutely loved it. So I'm like, well, fuck, I'm gonna have to read it now.
It's a great book. It's a great book, well written.
I'm excited. I feel like I need to end the year on like an amazing book.
I just want to show you. I don't know if that will come up, but that is the message from Jay Kristoff.
So lovely, isn't he? I can't see the messages, but
it's terrible. I'll send them to the Discord.
My friend on Instagram, you might know her, Laura, a quarter fantasy and smut. She is now. She's like famous for her smutty posts, but she absolutely loves him. And she messaged me the other day because she met him, and she sent me the pictures, and it was so cute. And he's like, he literally responds to all of his fans, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think Laura dressed up, didn't she?
Yeah, I begged.
Yeah. And she's tiny, and he's like up there.
Oh, something ridiculous.
Oh, he made her life though, and like I've heard that from so many people that he will literally respond to every message that he gets.
Very interactive, yeah.
There's not many like that, is there?
No,
No.
there isn't.
Chris, as Jay asked then, what's your quote to finish off?
Do you know what? I looked some up, and now it's going to be really embarrassing because I probably won't be able to find them.
What? How did you not prepare this?
I know. Surely one of us is going to ask.
You can't talk, Sarah, with your intros. Come on.
Yeah, we talk for 2 hours, so like, just behave yourself. I'm never going to be able to find it now. It's going to be just no. I can't find it. That's so terrible.
So many,
Oh no, there must be.
There is
one.
so many. There's
But
something
I,
about silence, about putting a man in a room.
Damien will probably know it.
Years, with 10,000 books, and he'll know 10,000 things. But put him in a room for 10 years in silence, he will know everything. It's kind of profound and trashy and everything that it is. It's a fantastic, well written book. There's so many. So I don't know where to start.
You've genuinely made me so excited to read it.
I'd love to get your opinion on it.
Yeah, I'm gonna read it this month, and then it will hopefully be in my top 10.
I'd say it's definitely gonna be in your top 10.
That's exciting.
I think it will be as well.
yeah.
Well, guys, we did it. We've talked about all these books. We've talked for so long, so much longer than I thought we were doing.
You said 10 minutes each book. We've done 2 hours.
Sorry, Smudge.
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
This is 4 hours Game of Thrones one.
This is what you just can't help it though, can you? Because when you talk about a book that you love that much, and we've had some big books today. These are all like very.
Almost all of them are like at least 800 pages.
Yeah, and they're like not even just big in that way, but like Empire of the Vampire, that's like one of the most loved books of the last year. The Way of Kings is obviously one of the most loved fantasy books. Tomorrow Times 3 is like obviously the book of the year. Throne of Glass, like they're all like big books. Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening to our buddy read wrap up of the books of November. Thanks as always to the members of our community who have got involved in the buddy reads. If you want to get involved with any of our book club and buddy reads, then everyone is welcome to join our community Discord, which is linked below in the description. To find out more about the Fantasy Fellowship, you can find us on Instagram, where we are fantasy_fellowship, Twitter, where we are @fanfellowship, and we also have a website, www.fantasy-fellowship.co.uk. If you enjoyed this buddy read wrap up, be sure to hit like, and to keep up to date with more Fantasy Fellowship videos, hit the subscribe button. Thanks everyone, bye.
Look at my face.